What's up, guys? It's Masked Up Swede. Right now, I'm checking out another UK drill plug video. This one is the Peckham Boys, London's deadliest gang. So, yeah, man, this is a long one. It's almost an hour. So, I'm probably gonna split this into two parts. Uh, but yeah, let's see what this one's saying, man. Big up UK drill plug for the video.
Used within this video are mine alone. Everything in this video has been
Also, I'm probably gonna try to keep like the talking to a minimum since it's a long video, and also I'm expecting a lot of the stuff is probably stuff I know already. So
taken from publicly available sources, and any footage or video used falls under the doctrine of fair use. I have made every effort to ensure all of the sources used within this video are accurate. However, I am not responsible for content that third parties publish. Without further ado, sit back and enjoy today's video. When it comes to the UK road rap and drill movement, there is no one quite as prominent and influential as the rappers from Peckham. Example being Giggs, who pioneered the modern-day sound, and blew up in the scene off the back of his tracks like Talking the Hardest, which has become dubbed the UK's unofficial national anthem. Despite this, however, what fans weren't aware of was the fact that even though Giggs had released extremely popular tracks, he was still deeply entrenched in the gang life in southeast London's district of Peckham. This seeing multiple shootings, stabbings, and murders. So much so that residents in some of Peckham's estates even began to refer to the area as Peck Narm, or more simply, the Narm, likening the violence in Peckham to Vietnam, similarly to how Chicago was nicknamed Chirac. This violence in Peckham has spanned decades, and was often the result of gangs in the area warring it out in the streets. The most prominent and dangerous of these gangs, in fact, being the Peckham Boys, who have several offshoot gangs as well as affiliations with other crews. Now, Peckham is a district located within the London borough of Southwark, this borough actually being ranked among the top 10 most dangerous boroughs that make up.
I've said this before, but it feels like there's a lot of areas on this top 10 list. Like it feels like every area is on that top 10 list.
The larger city of London. In 2023, the borough of Southwark had a crime rate of around 114 crimes per 1,000 people, this comparing poorly to London's crime rate as a whole. Following a 2021 census, the London borough of Southwark had a population of around 311,000 residents, whilst Peckham had an estimated 17,000 residents. This is crazy, as Peckham
Okay, so Peckham 17,000. That's not that much.
is relatively small, although this hasn't seemed to impact its crime, as at one point Peckham was named as one of the most dangerous areas in London, mainly being due to the Peckham Boys gang that controlled the district of Peckham. Within this video, I will take a deep and detailed dive into what made the Peckham Boys one of the deadliest gangs in the entirety of London, as well as the many rivalries that the Peckham Boys had found themselves in, thus resulting in numerous shootings, stabbings, as well as over 20 murders in relation to the Peckham Boys gang. Before I start this video, however, YouTube says only 8% of you are subscribed, so if you enjoy this content, feel free to subscribe as it takes time to make these videos, and also helps out the channel. But without further ado, sit back and enjoy one of the craziest videos I have made on this channel.
Buying nothing, had you running in the shop like you're buying something.
TV will blow your head over your shoulder.
Remember,
Man, look at the fucking Jake.
Tried it, young gunners.
Man came, man.
We had them playing Took and all this in a club and that.
Them boys covered up, instant wounds, chin splashed him when I splashed him.
I remember this freestyle. I remember seeing it at least. I don't remember the freestyle itself.
2, 6 splashed in piece.
That's a young Quang face, man.
I've done 2.
Yes!
I will remember this clip as well.
Yes! Yes!
Hey fam, Arsenal see done it, innit?
You no questions, fam. Why people for
Around this time, social media was crazy, man. Like, I remember seeing like clips on Snap and that almost like every other day of like guys riding out, posting everything on Snapchat.
The Peckham Boys are a large street gang from Peckham. Within the SE15 postcode, the gang was predominantly based around North Peckham, more specifically the North Peckham Estate, Gloucester Grove Estate, Willow
That looks massive.
Brook Estate, Camden Estate, and the Sumner Estate, these 5 estates being referred to as the 5 Estates. Now, in the 1990s, these large estates within Peckham each had smaller sets that controlled the estates, and later on, all of these small street gangs would link up to form the larger Peckham Boys collective. Example being the Peckham Grove Boys, the North Peckham Boys, the Yellow Brick Massive, the Outlaws, and the Acorn Boys. It's rumored that the larger Peckham Boys gang had originated in the 1970s. By the 90s, however, the 2 main gangs in Peckham included that of the Firehouse Crew, as well as YPB, or the Younger Peckham Boys. Later on, however,
I didn't know they were. My bad. I didn't know they were called YPB back then. I thought that was a new thing.
other gangs became prominent, like PYG, or Pecknarm Young Gunners, SI or Shoot Instant, and SN1, or Spare No One. During the
We know SM1, that's Gigs and those guys.
1990s and 2000s, the Peckham Boys had a very deadly gang feud with the Ghetto Boys from Deptford, as well as Brixton, all which will be discussed in detail within this video. Going into the 2000s, the Peckham Boys was subdivided into multiple subsets based around age range, example being PK or the Peckham Kids, the Younger Peckham Boys, as well as the Younger Peckham Boys. In the mid-2000s,
The younger Peckham Boys as well.
2000s, however, new names of the various sets began to emerge, example being SN1, previously the Peckham Boys, PYG, or Pecknarm Young Gunners, previously the Younger Peckham Boys, and SI, or Shoot Instant, which was previously known as the Younger Peckham Boys, or YPB. Now, the Peckham Boys would be making a noise in the streets in the 1990s. It was going into the 2000s, however, that they became one of the most infamous gangs in London as a whole, even making national headlines at the start of the 2000s. In July 2000, a gunman from Peckham noticed a group of people standing outside of the Chicago nightclub within Peckham, southeast London.
9 injured. That's crazy, man.
The gunman started firing indiscriminately into the crowd, hitting 9 people. Among the injured included a 15-year-old girl, as well as 4 other females. One man, who was 27, was found with 2 shots to the chest after the shooting, and was described as in critical condition. He, as well as the 8 others, were rushed to hospital, and luckily, all survived the attack. The crime was quickly reported due to how shocking it was, and at the time, this was one of the worst shootings that London had ever seen, shocking nearby communities. This Chicago nightclub, however, was known by Peckham gang members, and 6 months after this deadly shooting, a man was shot dead in a double shooting outside of the same Chicago nightclub. Because of this, it was believed that the nightclub shut down not too long after the violence had occurred. A prominent Peckham rapper known as Gigs, who will become a lot more relevant later, actually referenced this same nightclub in a later song, in which he claimed that he wasn't at the Chicago's nightclub to rave, but instead to catch his rivals with a big strap. Just a few months following this wave of violence, in November 2000, a 17-year-old was stabbed to death in a North Peckham estate. His body was later discovered in the back of a vehicle parked at King's College Hospital within South London. An investigation was launched after the attack, and a 17-year-old youth was later arrested and
R.I.P., man.
charged. However, I couldn't find if he was found guilty. Rest in peace. Only 9 days later, on the 27th of November 2000, the community would be shocked at the death of a 10-year-old schoolboy who was shockingly killed by young members of the Untouchables, which was a smaller gang located
R.I.P., man. 10 years old. That's way too much, man.
within Peckham. On the 27th of November 2000 at around 4:30 p.m., 10-year-old Damiola Taylor left Peckham Library and traveled toward the North Peckham estate. Whilst on his way home, he was surrounded by a gang of youths believed to be from the Untouchables gang. One of the youths then used a broken glass bottle and thrusted it toward 10-year-old Damiola Taylor's thigh, sadly resulting in him being stabbed. This wound severed an artery, however, and resulted in Damiola Taylor losing quite a lot of blood on the scene. He was found in the stairwell and was rushed to King's College Hospital, where he sadly died hours later. A murder investigation was then launched. However, it would take a few years for the people responsible to receive punishment.
Few years.
In 2002, 4 youths, including 2 16-year-old brothers, were arrested and even went on trial for the murder of 10-year-old Damiola Taylor. Following the trial, all 4 were acquitted of the murder, as the witness was supposedly unreliable. Police
But they didn't even get sentenced.
continued to investigate following this, and actually found Damiola Taylor's blood on a teen known as Danny Preddy's shoes. In 2005, both Danny Preddy and his brother Ricky Preddy, who were 16 and 17, were arrested, as well as another 19-year-old man. In 2006,
That was few years later, man.
the Preddy brothers were found guilty of Damiola's manslaughter, and were both sentenced to 8 years after being found guilty of Damiola's murder, with this case receiving
8. That was kinda low, man.
receiving widespread attention due to how shocking it was. Rest in peace, Demiola Taylor. It's believed that in 2000, a well-respected member of the Peckham Boys known as Tipsy, who was often credited to be one of the richest members of the Peckham Boys at the time. Anyways, he was arrested after being caught with firearms as well as drugs. He was charged and later sentenced to 10 years in prison for the incident. Despite Tipsy's 10-year sentence, however, he was later released in 2004, with this information becoming more relevant as the story goes on. Also around the early 2000s, the Peckham Boys began to consolidate as one large gang that was based off age range, example being YYPB, or Younger Peckham Boys, YPB, or Younger Peckham Boys, and finally SN1, which was believed to contain the olders in the gang. Now, fast forwarding to 2003, due to how large the Peckham Boys gang was, a civil war began to brew, this mainly being due to the presence of a recently recruited Peckham Boys member known as Mender. See, Mender was previously associated with the Ghetto Boys, who were at war with the Peckham Boys at this time. He was later defected from the Ghetto Boys, however, and began to associate himself with their rivals, the Peckham Boys. It's even rumored that at one point, Mender
Gotta be mad to like try to trust a guy that came like from the ops, which switched over to your side. That's gotta be mad, man.
robbed a member of the Peckham Boys. This factor, of course, meant that the membership of the Peckham Boys were split. Some took Mender's side, whilst others didn't agree with it and did not trust Mender at all. Sadly, in September 2003, Mender was approached by members believed to be from the Younger Peckham Boys gang. He was then stabbed in the chest by the members who fled seconds later. Emergency services rushed to Mender's aid. However, not long after being stabbed, he was pronounced dead. A murder investigation was
R.I.P., man.
launched, and a 17-year-old was sentenced to 11 years, whilst 2 other teens were given 7-year terms after being found guilty of Mender's manslaughter. Rest in peace, Mender. Shortly after this, in 2004, after serving around 3 years of his sentence, Peckham legend Tipsy was released in Cambridge to carry out a 4-week placement where he would be helping disabled people. Just a few days after being released, on the 3rd of July 2004 at around 7 p.m., Tipsy would be riding his motorcycle through Camberwell High Street when he was approached by rivals in a car and was rammed off his motorcycle. One of the rival gang members then exited the vehicle and stood over Tipsy, shooting him multiple times in the head and chest before the attackers fled seconds later. Tipsy was rushed to a nearby hospital, but was sadly pronounced dead on arrival, with yet another murder investigation being launched.
R.I.P., man.
Despite an investigation, as well as one arrest, the murder has actually remained unsolved. One man was charged, however his trial was discontinued and he was found not guilty, leaving the murder of Tipsy unsolved. Rest in peace, Tipsy. Just a few months following this, in October 2004, the rivalry between the Peckham Boys and the Ghetto Boys was televised, when a group of Peckham Boys noticed rival Ghetto Boys outside of the Urban Music Awards, which was being held at the Barbican Centre in London. Shortly after both sides noticed one another, 18 shots would be fired by both groups. During this shooting, a 25-year-old innocent woman, Helen Kelly, was hit by a bullet that ricocheted off the wiring in her bra, changing direction.
Ricocheted off the underwiring in her bra. What the hell?
Innocent woman, Helen Kelly, was hit by a bullet that ricocheted off the wiring in her bra, changing directions and hitting her in the breast. Now, both groups of gang members dispersed shortly after the shooting, with Helen Kelly being rushed to a nearby hospital, where she luckily recovered and survived the attack.
She must have been lucky, man.
Investigation was launched, and later in 2005, 28-year-old Linton Ambersley was jailed for 12 years. Another 28-year-old man known as Tyron Headley was also jailed for assisting an offender. Going into 2005, Giggs, who hailed from the Peckham Boys gang, was released from prison following a 2.5-year prison sentence, after allegedly being charged with a firearm offense in 2003. Anyways, shortly after he was released, the Peckham Boys gang became known under multiple new aliases. The Peckham Boys became known as SN1, which stood for Spare No One. The Younger Peckham Boys became known as SI, or Shoot Instant, whilst the youngest generation, the Younger Peckham Boys, became known as PYG, or Pecknarm Young Gunners. So for simplicity's sake, from now on, I'll refer to the gangs as these 3 main sets. Shortly after this, Giggs, who I just spoke about, began to experiment with music, often going to the studio and recording songs. Eventually, him alongside the SN1 gang released a 24-track mixtape titled Bloody Raw. Giggs actually had a track dedicated to him titled No 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 Freestyle, with this song celebrating his freeing from prison. Within this track, Giggs mainly rapped about females, as well as the streets of Peckham. This in fact was one of the first instances of Giggs releasing public music. However, later down the line, Giggs would become one of the biggest UK rappers coming out of Peckham. At the end of August 2005, 4 younger Peckham boys, including Bert's, Tiny Ryder, Timmy, and Diamond, stormed a christening that was being held in Peckham. Bert's
Christening. They don't care if it's a funeral, it's a christening, like whatever it is.
Then used a gun and shot into the air. This bullet then ricocheted after being shot and hit an innocent woman who was cradling her baby. Sadly, this woman died shortly after being shot, with
That's crazy, man. R.I.P.
the younger Peckham boys then robbing bystanders and fleeing seconds later. An investigation was launched. However, before police had any information on Burtz, he went on to kill again just weeks later. 2 weeks later, in September 2005, that same YPB member, Burtz, was traveling around Peckham. He noticed a well-known female member of the SN1 gang known as Ruthless. SN1 was actually closely associated with the younger Peckham boys. This didn't matter to Burtz, however, who after noticing Ruthless, then pulled her out from a car and stabbed her multiple times in the heart. Sadly, she died minutes later, with another
R.I.P. man.
investigation being launched. Burtz was quickly arrested and charged with both murders. It was said in court that Burtz had attacked Ruthless due to the fact that she was heard disrespecting him on a phone call a day earlier. Burtz confessed to killing Ruthless, however never confessed to killing the innocent woman 2 weeks earlier. After a trial, however, Burtz was found guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison for both murders. Rest in peace. It's even believed that following the death of Ruthless, Giggs, also from the SN1 crew, released a track in her remembrance in 2008. This titled Ruthless Freestyle. Rest in peace. Now, in 2006, a large group of around 30 Shoot Instant gang members from Peckham traveled from their main turf onto the rival Ghetto Boys block. Upon reaching the block, the large group noticed the brother of two prominent Ghetto Boy members known as Smiler and Craver. This man was Jason Gale Bent and was actually stabbed 10 years earlier, causing him to turn his back on the gang violence in the area. Anyways, after the large group of Shoot Instant members noticed Jason Gale Bent, one of them retrieved a firearm and shot toward him. A fight then broke out. However, during this fight, he was stabbed in the heart, with the Shoot Instant members fleeing seconds later. Jason Gale Bent staggered for a few minutes after the attack. However, he collapsed in his home and sadly died. Emergency services and police arrived on the scene shortly.
R.I.P. man. I'm assuming after being like almost 15 minutes into this video, it's gonna be a lot of R.I.P.s, man.
Following the attack, an investigation was launched. However, it's believed that the murder has remained unsolved, with the police connecting the murder of Jason Gale Bent to the attempted murder of another man in nearby Deptford only a few minutes later. Rest in peace, Jason Gale Bent. Following this, a week later, Ghetto Boys would plan to carry out drive-by shootings outside of schools in Peckham in an attempt
Outside of schools?
at killing YPB members thought to be behind the murder of Jason Gale Bent a week earlier. Their plans were interrupted, however, when police evacuated over 2,000 pupils from Peckham Academy, as well as Harris
That's a big school, man. 2,000 students.
Girls Academy. The schools were later reopened a few days after the threats when police believed it was safe for the pupils to attend school. Peckham Boys in November 2006 were so influential within the streets, in fact, that they actually appeared in a Time Out magazine, being ranked among the top 100 most influential groups within London at the time, just showing how prominent they had become at the time. 100 within the streets, in fact, that they actually Peckham Boys in November 2006 were so influential within the streets, in fact, that they actually appeared in a Time Out magazine, being ranked among the top 100 most influential groups within London at the time, just showing how prominent they had become at the time. However, not everyone knew the violent backstory regarding the gang that was only going to get worse and more deadly as the years went on. In February 2007, a group of Peckham gang members were arguing amongst one another, as they had allegedly pulled off a few successful robberies. However, some members didn't split any of the money with the others. Due to this, a group of Peckham members sought out other Peckham members. As a result of this, 15-year-old Michael Dosunmu was shot dead whilst in his bed, with this being a case of mistaken identity, as the attackers wanted
Mistaken identity.
Dosunmu was shot dead whilst in his bed, with this being a case of mistaken identity, as the attackers wanted to kill his older brother. Only days after this, however, 21-year-old Javari
R.I.P. man.
Crichton approached a group of Peckham members to discuss the money made from the robberies. After arriving at the agreed spot, he was stabbed to death by the Peckham gang members. Now, an investigation was launched into both murders. The killing of Javari Crichton remains unsolved. However, 2 men were jailed for 30 years in connection to the murder of Michael Dosunmu. The police linked both the murder of Javari Crichton and Michael Dosunmu together, and believed it was a result of an internal conflict within the Peckham Boys gang. Rest in peace, both Javari Crichton and Michael Dosunmu.
Always about the money, man.
Shortly after these 2 murders, in July 2007, a prominent member of the SN1 gang, known under the street name Raver, was arrested after his car was stopped by police. He was found in possession of a MAC-10 machine gun, 3 handguns, 2 silencers, 379 rounds of ammunition.
That's a lot to be driving around with, man.
ammunition, 60,000 fake pills, and finally thousands of pounds of cocaine. During the trial, the handguns were investigated and were actually linked to 6 unsolved shootings in the months prior. In the end, however, Raver was sentenced to
Hold on, what?
were actually linked to 6 unsolved shootings of cocaine. During the trial, the handguns were investigated and were actually linked to 6 unsolved shootings in the months prior. In the end, however, Raver
So the guns were also used in several shootings.
was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 10 years. Around 3 months following this incident, in October 2007, a group of Peckham boys noticed a group of rival ghetto boys in New Cross. Both groups began to shoot toward each other. However, sadly during the shooting, an innocent nurse known as Madga Pniewska was hit.
Keep hitting civilians, man.
However, sadly during the shooting, an innocent nurse known as Madga Pniewska was hit and sadly died on the scene, with both groups dispersing after the shooting.
R.I.P., man.
Emergency services arrived shortly after the shooting. Upon arriving, an investigation was launched into the murder. A Ghetto Boys member known as Toner was arrested and charged. However, he didn't actually shoot Madga, but did know who did and decided not to snitch, eventually being given 20 years for the incident.
They gave him 20 because he wouldn't snitch. Damn, is that how they do it in the UK? Over here, he would have been released if it wasn't him, and they couldn't prove it was him. Damn, that's crazy, man.
Rest in peace, Madga Pniewska. Shortly after this, on the 14th of October 2008, a group of gang members from Woolwich approached a man and asked him where he was from. The man responded Peckham, and was then shot dead before he could say anything else. With the attackers
What the hell? They were moving crazy back then, man.
the man responded Peckham, and was then shot dead before he could say anything else.
He just said he was from Peckham and got shot.
With the attackers fleeing shortly after the shooting, this murder has remained unsolved, with police believing it was due to the rivalries that the Peckham gangs had gotten themselves into. It's also known
Yeah, it looks like back then, like around this time, shit was crazy, man. They were reckless as hell.
that the man was believed to be innocent, and was not in fact involved with the Peckham gangs, but was from the area. Rest in peace.
R.I.P., man.
Now, at the end of 2007, Giggs released one of his first albums titled Ard Bodied. This album, in fact, featured one of his biggest songs titled Talkin' to Hardest, which has amassed over 46 million streams on Spotify and 11 million views on YouTube. This track is actually often credited to be the UK's unofficial national anthem, just showing how prominent Giggs had become within the UK rap scene. Now, during the summer months of 2008, both the Ghetto Boys and a member of the OPB gang, a subset of the Shoot Instant gang, known as Killa Kai, arranged to squash the beef between Ghetto and Peckham.
I feel like I've heard Killa Kai before as well.
The two gangs then decided to attend the Notting Hill Carnival. Around 180 members of both
Oh yeah, we remember this footage I've seen before as well.
Ghetto and Peckham met each other and made their way toward the carnival. However, they were intercepted by police who thought that both Ghetto and Peckham were going to war one another. This was actually one of the biggest moments in Peckham, as now the gangs in Peckham were affiliated with the Ghetto Boys. Giggs rapped about this incident in the track titled Ruthless Freestyle, where he rapped Ghetto versus Peckham. I ain't on that dead beef, so I holla at my motherfucking guy.
Yeah, that's gotta be a big moment, man, especially after seeing this, how this beef was going, man.
Smiley. Killa Kai, who operated the link-up, also mentioned it, rapping, I organized ghetto linking NARM. I made history. Darg, I'm a boss in the NARM. It was a southeast link-up. Anyhow, we got Carney, it would have been nuts. The story of both the Peckham and Ghetto beef was eventually adapted into a movie by Rapman titled Blue Story. This movie was an instant
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I still haven't seen that.
hit and was even nominated for multiple awards. Now, in 2008, whilst the gang feud between the Ghetto Boys and Peckham was no longer, the Peckham-based gangs had now found themselves in a rivalry with Brixton gangs like OC, which later became 410, as well as Gas, which was predominantly based around
Also, this is when it became beef with Gas Gang and obviously OC as well.
on the Angeltown estate, which in itself has a long history of gangs on
That's 150, right? Angel Town.
The estate. The most well-known gang that splintered off from Gas Gang was actually Get Back Gang, or 150, which in itself has become a very prominent gang within South London in recent years. This Peckham and Brixton rivalry became very deadly, very quickly, as you will see as this video goes on. Now, in August 2008, the first instance of this beef kicking off would occur only weeks after the two sides began to rival one another. In August 2008, a group of Brixton gang members believed to be from the OC gang would ride out onto Walworth Road within Walworth, SE17. The OC gang members from Brixton noticed two members of the Shoot Instant gang known as Snap Capone and Butch. After both Butch and
Snap Capone as well.
Snap Capone noticed the OC members they ran into a cost cutter store. However, the OC gang members began to fire toward them, hitting an innocent 18-year-old named Ryan Bravo,
Not an innocent again, man.
who was buying milk at the time. He was sadly pronounced dead seconds after being
R.I.P. man.
hit, with the Brixton gang members fleeing. It's rumored that an OC member known as Huss was later arrested for this brazen shooting and was handed 24 years. Huss was even remembered by SD from Harlem Spartans in 2022, with SD
Yeah, all these links are crazy, man. It's like everybody's linked to everybody some way, somehow, man. I don't know.
posting this on his story. Rest in peace, Ryan Bravo. A month later, in September 2008, police conducted multiple raids on high-ranking members of the Peckham Boys, leading to multiple arrests. Just under a month following these raids on prominent Peckham Boys, in October 2008, members associated with the Brixton gangs noticed 20-year-old Terms, who was a known SN1 member from Peckham. The Brixton members then shot dead Terms as he left his house. Rest in peace, Terms.
R.I.P. man.
Due to this, the Peckham and Brixton rivalry became very heated and was talk of the town in both Peckham and Brixton. If you would like a video on the Brixton gangs in the future, let me know in the comments below. Now, around this time, Giggs from the SN1 gang was actually making waves in the UK road rap scene, previously dropping his debut album Walk into Park earlier in 2008. This album in fact further shone a spotlight on Giggs, who was already gaining a buzz off the back of his track Talkin' to Hardest. In November 2008, Giggs was actually nominated for the BET Awards, eventually winning the Best UK Hip-Hop Act, which was
That was early as well to get an award like that.
a crazy accomplishment for Giggs, as he was one of the pioneers of the UK road rap scene, as was SN1 as a whole group. Sadly, however, even though all of these new eyes were looking in on the Peckham-based collective, there was still a war brewing in the streets, and in 2009, the war continued. In February 2009, 25-year-old Big Larry, who was alleged to have been a well-respected Peckham older, would be walking down a street in Dulwich when a gunman, believed to be from the SN1 gang, approached him from behind. The gunman then shot 25-year-old Big Larry in the head, killing him instantly. It's rumored that Big Larry actually had a falling out with other Peckham gang members, eventually leading to his death, as he was once a well-known Peckham gang member. An investigation was launched into his murder. However, despite an entire investigation, the murder of Big Larry remains unsolved. Rest in peace,
R.I.P. man.
Big Larry. Now, during 2009, police would be looking into one of the Peckham gangs, this being PYG, as they, as well as the other Peckham gangs like SN1 and OPB, had been in an ongoing war with Brixton around this time. Anyways, the solicitors of these PYG members had actually been given access to CCTV that showed both Peckham members as well as Brixton members riding out onto one another. It's rumored that an associate of one of the Peckham gangs then accessed the CCTV and uploaded it onto YouTube, where it gained thousands of views. OC members from Brixton later rapped about this, dissing the PYG gang and calling them the police as they had access to the CCTV footage.
Editors, push yours.
Editors.
CCTV. Man's working in the Jake, man. Man's working with the fucking Jake.
Tried it, young gunners.
These guys do not look old, man.
Hey, man, done our thing, man. We're working with the Jake.
Following this, in November 2009, 22-year-old Daniel Duke, or Mimer, who was allegedly associated with the MOB gang, which was an acronym for Mandem on Brandon, this being a crew originating from the Brandon estate, SE17, which was later popularized after Moscow. 17 began to
How to say that?
become more prominent on the estate. Anyways, 22-year-old Mimer was shot 3 times near an underground station within Kennington, South London. Police and emergency services quickly arrived on the scene and transported 22-year-old Mimer to a nearby hospital, where he was sadly pronounced dead later that same day. An investigation
R.I.P. again, man.
was launched shortly after his murder, with 2 rumored Shoot Instant members from Peckham being arrested and charged in connection. However, following a trial, both were acquitted of the murder charge and were let free. Rest in peace, Daniel Duke, or Mimer. At the end of 2009 and start of
seems like a lot more people got away with murder back then. It feels like nowadays a lot of them get caught, man.
2010, the Peckham Boys were basically the most well-known gang in London, often disrupting police and the community. The Peckham Boys were even seen having a snowball fight with Met police officers in an
What the hell?
old video, which has since been recovered from around the end of 2000.
That's crazy. Snowball fight with the police.
2009, this snowball fight actually led to the police retreating back into their van and closing the door, where the Peckham Boys continued to throw snowballs at them, even pulling the door back open.
I mean, at least it's just snowballs. They weren't throwing like stones or nothing. So, I mean,
Now, going into 2010, the war between Peckham and Brixton quickly became one of the most talked about on the streets at the time, with the Peckham gangs even beginning to rival one another at one point in 2010, with the gang from Letsham splintering off and rivaling the rest of Peckham.
rivaling the rest of Peckham. So this little block rivaling all of this. That's crazy, man.
Now, during 2010, a prominent Shoot Instant member known as Nutty was on remand after allegedly purchasing guns in a different town. He didn't act alone, however, and a separate 17-year-old known as Samuel was also facing charges, however was let out under investigation. Nutty then offered Samuel money to take the fall on the gun charge at the trial. However, Samuel denied this, and in June 2010, only days before the trial was set to start, Samuel was shot dead by Peckham gang members in a car. The car was then set on fire by a PYG member known as CS, with Samuel still being inside the vehicle.
Oh, I know. Is that the CS I'm thinking? Like the rapper?
This then led to yet another murder investigation being launched. Police quickly connected this incident to the gun charge, and even charged Shoot Instant member Nutty for the murder of Samuel. They also charged CS for burning the car used in the attack. And following a lengthy trial, Nutty was sentenced to life with a minimum of 32 years for arranging the murder of Samuel, while CS was sentenced to 4 years for discarding of the car. Rest in peace,
Okay, so he just got for the car.
Samuel. Now,
R.I.P., man.
one of the main blocks that identified with the Peckham Boys was that of the Letsham estate, which around the 2010s splintered off from the Peckham gangs like PYG, SN1, OPB, and SI or Shoot Instant. The gang from the Letsham estate then became known as the Letsham Gs, with this gang going on to rival their old friends from Peckham. Around this time, the PYG or Pecknarm Young Gunners gang became more prominently known under the name Anti. This war between Peckham and Letsham then got very deadly as the year 2010 went on. On the 6th of September 2010, a shooting took place on the Letsham estate. It's rumored the shooting was carried out by alleged Peckham gang members onto rivals from the Letsham Gs. Luckily, however, no one was injured during the shooting, and just a few hours later, a member of the OPB gang known as Taz from Peckham sadly died after his bike was hit by a car within Peckham. Later that same day, after a mural was constructed for Taz, a member of the Letsham gang known as Lil Grem would visit his mural to pay his respects to the fallen member. Upon arriving, however, Lil Grem was gunned down by a Peckham gang member known as Snap, who was in fact the
So he was there trying to pay his respect, even though I guess they were beefing, and he got killed for it. R.I.P., man.
older of Snap Capone.
R.I.P. to both of them.
Snap was later arrested for his murder and was sentenced to 35 years. The older of Snap Capone. Snap was later arrested
Older of Snap Capone.
for his murder and was sentenced to 35 years for the killing of.
Damn. Yeah, some of these sentences, like, I don't even feel like they make sense. Like, sometimes they give like 35 for what looks like I don't want to say a regular murder because that sounds crazy, but I mean, I don't get, like, some get 20, some get 35, but I don't really see the difference in how they've done it.
Of Lil Grem. Rest in peace, both Taz and Lil Grem. Now, the Peckham Boys, as well as their rivalries, were not the only heated gang feuds in London around this time, and about a 40-minute drive away, two groups of gangs in Newham would also be battling it out in the streets. However, I have made a video on this rivalry, so feel free to check it out. Anyways, one of the people killed within this rivalry was Ace, who was an alleged Custom House member. His killer was rumored to have been a CGE member known as Sammy Guns. I am saying this because, in October 2010, Sammy Guns got himself into a rivalry with SN1 and anti-gang members. These Peckham members then rode out onto Newham and noticed 16-year-old Sammy Guns shooting him dead on the scene before
R.I.P.
Fleeing moments later. An investigation was launched. However, the murder has remained unsolved. Rest in peace, Sammy Guns. Shortly after this, in December 2010, 3 gang members known as Vesta, Cookie, and Tiny Mantis, who were rumored to have been from the Crane Block gang, which previously splintered off from the Peckham gangs, and actually started to rival the Peckham boys. The 3 were chilling on the Pelican Estate, which was the main block for the Crane Block gang. Whilst on the estate, a group of alleged Peckham boys noticed Vesta, who was shot dead. Both Cookie and Tiny Mantis were then stabbed multiple times. Luckily, both Cookie and Tiny Mantis survived. However, Vesta sadly died, with another murder investigation being
R.I.P. man. Yeah, this video's just non-stop murders, man. It's crazy. Like I can't imagine growing up around all of this. Like like actually being in it, like living on these blocks and that. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't say I've been around murders, but since Sweden's a lot like smaller, it's like a 20-minute drive takes you a long way. So I might have been in like the same distance, but it's still not as close. That makes sense. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end the first part right here, and I'm gonna start the second part. But yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments so far, and I'll see you in part 2, man. Out. Peace.